This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance. Welcome to the NJ Criminal Podcast.
Continuing today in our cannabis series, we have Stockton University adjunct professor Rob Mejia. Rob teaches several classes for Stockton University in the Cannabis Studies Department, specifically dealing with cannabis and social justice. He is also the founder of Our Community Harvest, a cannabis education company, and is also part owner of Garden State Canna Collective, a women's business enterprise. He's the author of multiple books and articles on cannabis and was also recently named by New Jersey Cannabis Insider as one of 22 to watch in 2022 in New Jersey cannabis. Rob, welcome.
Thank you so much for that very warm and elaborate introduction.
Well, I'm sure I didn't cover everything, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time today to speak with us. So let's jump right into it. You are an adjunct professor at Stockton University in the Cannabis Studies Department, and I'm curious, how was it that you got involved in cannabis studies?
Sure. So my journey started quite a while ago, and it started because of my older sister, Teresa. I am one of 13 kids. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and I'm the sixth of 13.
Wow, God bless your parents.
Yes, it was always a very lively household.
I bet.
So unfortunately, about a decade ago, my older sister, Teresa, got uterine cancer. And as she was battling her condition, they put her on opioids for the very first time. And she went from being a healthy mid-50s woman to someone who was confused. She definitely was not present the whole time. And she also started to waste away. So she lost her appetite. Well, when all that was happening, I kept asking myself, why is nobody offering her medical cannabis? I know it works well for pain relief. I know it stimulates appetite. It could be a really good alternative for her. But it never really came up. And unfortunately, she did pass relatively quickly. But that sort of obsession to answer that question really stuck with me. And so I started doing a tremendous amount of research on the medical benefits of cannabis. And along the way, of course, you find out such an amazing history of prohibition. You find out where it connects with business and business opportunities. You find out that it has it affects almost every part of someone's life. And so I really became kind of obsessed with it. And from there, I decided that I did want to use my background to start educating people on cannabis and become kind of a Cannabis 101 expert. And so that's exactly what I did. And I did write the Essential Cannabis book, Essential Cannabis Journal. I started doing lectures and seminars. I created online courses. And that's really where I intersected with Stockton. So I had created a course called Introduction to the Business of Cannabis, which is offered through their Continuing Studies Department. And I also visited the campus with one of my sons who was looking at colleges, and I had a chance to talk to one of their professors in the Cannabis Studies Department who invited me to speak in their class. And they saw all the things that I was doing and thought I would be a good prospect to teach their cannabis internship preparation course, which essentially teaches students about different aspects in the business, how to get into the business, how to write a resume, all those kinds of things. And that's what I've been doing for them for over 3 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what year was it that you began your research? Because this all predated the legalization of marijuana in New Jersey, correct?
It is. I started back about 2010, and in part that was because, again, since I am from Colorado, I do have a lot of family that's still there. And one of my younger brothers is very involved in politics. He's worked for a couple of the governors. He even ran for mayor at one point. And back in 2010, he started talking to me, and he said, do you know that Colorado is starting to look at legalizing adult use? And I was just kind of blown away by that and thought, wow, talk about some amazing business opportunities that could come up, because I am an entrepreneur, and I am always looking for kind of very unique opportunities to pursue. And so that's why I thought, well, I should probably get educated about it from a business perspective. And also I want to know about it because I have kids, family, friends, and I'd like to give them accurate information as well. So it really started with curiosity about what an adult use market would be and sort of just blossomed from there.
Did you teach one of the first classes on cannabis at Stockton?
I was there actually the first semester after they started. So
Yeah.
Dr. Sadia was the one that did a lot of the curriculum and started the process back in about 2016, because you can imagine it has to go through a lot of hands to be approved. You have to decide what department it's going to be in, what classes you're going to offer. And they were a pioneer, so
I
they
was
had,
going to
they had a
say
lot of work to do.
yeah, I was just going to say that's really visionary because, at that point in time, as you've already said, although other states were moving towards decriminalization and legalization, it was down the road a bit for New Jersey. So
Uh,
that was great that Stockton had that foresight
Yeah,
to do that.
it did turn out to be very fortunate. So then when they started offering a minor in cannabis studies starting in fall of 2018, I joined their staff the very next semester after that, and I've been there since, and I've expanded my duty. So I started teaching the preparation for cannabis internship class. I taught a section of the introduction to medical cannabis class, and then I developed a new course called social justice in cannabis, which got approved a couple years ago, and I am teaching it for the second time in the fall. So they've been so supportive of all the things that I've wanted to pursue in the cannabis world.
That's amazing. That's great. So, as of right now, Stockton University has, correct me if I'm wrong, just the minor in cannabis studies?
That's correct. And the
Okay.
reason we did that was because we wanted to let students pursue whatever major that they wanted to, but then also give them a very good baseline of cannabis knowledge so they could then go into the cannabis field if they wanted. And you can imagine that employers still like to train their employees in cannabis because there are so many specific regulations and so many things specific to each individual company that it turned out to be such a good idea that they knew when a Stockton student walks in there, they do know a good deal about cannabis, but then they also are certainly willing to learn about how operations have to occur at that particular business.
Well, sure. And particularly now, I think, although cannabis was legalized, it's been a little while now. I think New Jersey's taken their time in getting all the pieces in place so that people can actually begin applying for the licenses, etc. By the time someone has graduated from Stockton, and presumably now there are, individuals that have graduated with this minor, they're kind of right in place to join or to either start their own business and apply for the license if they're able, or to work for someone else who does.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly right. And we're actually even seeing students who are starting to get promotions now. So the first wave of students that came out of our program, and the very first year we had a whopping 6 graduates. And I can tell you that this year I was at the graduation ceremony and I got to see 24 of my students walk and graduate with a minor in cannabis studies. Plus, that was only one of the graduations. There were others. So I know we had upwards of 30 students who are all going into the cannabis industry. And right now we have over 120 that are pursuing their minor.
oh, I'm sure that there'll be even more. Has there been any discussion of developing a major?
We do talk about that a little bit. The
Hmm.
difficulty there, or the choices, are that you really have to choose a particular pathway. And the
Hmm.
few other colleges that have done it, they've either chosen cultivation, so you can get a major in cultivation at places like Colorado State University Pueblo, for example,
Hmm.
or you can major in science. So Northern Michigan, for example, they have a bachelor's in cannabis science that you can get. So trying to come up with a minor outside of those areas, I think, would be really challenging. So I do like the way that we offer courses that kind of bring in any student possible. I would like to see us expand into a couple other courses like a hospitality
Hmm.
and cannabis tourism class, because we have a good school in hospitality, and that area is definitely going to just grow. And I'd like to see us offer a couple more science classes as well. So I am hoping we'll add a few more offerings, but I do like the way that the minor does function.
To date, what types of students are you seeing taking these types of classes? Are they business majors? Are they science majors? Like, what do you typically see so far?
There are primarily 3 large buckets. A third have a business background. A third come from the different health sciences. So we have a good holistic health department. We have physical therapy, exercise science, nursing. So I do see a number of students come from those disciplines. But then in the middle, I really have anybody.
Hmm.
English majors, sociology, communication, computer science, anything you can imagine, they're in there.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. We were looking at your website, and describe for me why you feel that cannabis education is important to both, employers, communities, colleges, etc.
Sure, there are so many stakeholders that do need cannabis education, and I've always said that my goal is really to inform, not to persuade. I'm not here to persuade people to use cannabis or to jump into business, but I want to give them all the information and tools necessary so they can make an informed decision. So I do want to fight the myths. I do want to let them know where the business opportunities lie. I do want to let the employers know what their particular challenges and dangers are, because you can imagine that there's a lot of discussion that we have legal, medical, and now legal adult use cannabis. And if you're an employer, what do you do if you have someone who is using cannabis, either on the job or you suspect they've used it before they've come to work? And obviously, if they're not impaired, they should be able to function in their job just fine. But at the same time, if you do think they're impaired, what are your rights? What are the employee rights? There's also things like company parties. If you allow people to drink alcohol at a party, what's saying that they can't smoke a joint at a party? So there are all those kind of policies that do come up. There's some youth risks that I do like to point out as well. So really, I just really want to be the person that is an educator in broad sense, and will point out both the opportunities, the benefits, and some of the risks and challenges.
Sure. And the legalization, it took a while. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of political back and forth. Having followed it for so long, were you pleased with the final product, the final piece of legislation, or was there anything about it that you thought should have been different, or were you just happy that there was finally a decision on the issue?
Well, the one thing I had hoped, and the one thing I was actually fairly confident about early on, is I thought that New Jersey was going to legalize by the legislature and not by popular vote. And so far, there have only been a couple other states that have done that, Illinois and Vermont, for example. But the advantage is, if you legalize by legislature, you can be more nimble and you can change your rules quicker, and I would say more effectively, versus if you do have people who vote on it, then you really do have to have more measures in place to change anything. So you can't be quite as nimble. So I was disappointed that we had two false starts where it looked like legislature was going to do it, and then they were, I think, 4 votes short the first time and 2 votes short the second time. But eventually, when we did legalize the popular vote, I was glad, because such a mandate. I mean, we had 67.5% basically that said we should legalize, and so that really gave a message to municipalities and other states to say we are accepting of legal adult use cannabis.
Right. I wanted to kind of just shift gears a little bit, and then maybe we can go back to the cannabis studies major. But I wanted to talk about the cannabis education company that you founded, Our Community Harvest. Tell me about that and how that came about and what it is.
Sure. So one little bit of background information about me is I am a cooking enthusiast.
Nice.
And
okay.
so when it is a great hobby to have. So when I started Our Community Harvest, I originally envisioned it as a place people could learn how to cook with cannabis. Mm-hmm. And I did that in part because I thought, it's such a good sustainable way of using cannabis. It can also definitely help medical patients. Also, people wouldn't have to smoke, and there may be some dangers there. So I thought that would be a good thing to pursue, and I knew people would be kind of enthusiastic about it. But when I launched my company, even the people I was talking to that wanted to cook with cannabis, they had such a dearth of basic knowledge that I had to kind of back up and say, well, you know what? I need to become a Cannabis 101 person, and I'll always include cooking with cannabis in there, but I do need to give some basic information first before they can really come to the cooking part of it. So that's how it started. And sort of under the umbrella of Our Community Harvest, I wanted to be a provider of education in many forms. So we do in-person seminars, we do cooking demonstrations, we write copy for websites, we do things like brochures, catalogs, posters, online courses, really, if you name it, we want to be part of the cannabis education landscape.
What do you think is the most common misconception about cooking with cannabis? If there is any.
Probably the dosing is the most challenging. I would say the perception is some people think that you can just put the flour directly into whatever you're cooking. So you do, if you look at some of the 70s and 80s
the stereotypical pot brownies
we used to watch, that people would just take the flour and put it in with a brownie mix, and they would show
hope
people
for the best.
having exaggerated effects. But at the meantime, if you don't decarboxylate it, which is a fancy word for slow roasting, that's the heat is what activates the THC and or the CBD, which are the main parts of the cannabis plant. Then you won't get very much potency, and your recipe will just be a failure. So you have to take the step of decarboxylating or slow roasting your flour first, and then you have to infuse it in something that has fat in it. So things like butter, olive oil, vegetable oil, coconut oil, maple syrup, all those things work very well for infusions. And it does take a while. And at the end of it, if you know what kind of product you started with, what the potency was, you can actually use a calculator that's on my website and figure out what the dosing is. And that, I would say, having proper dosing of edibles is one of the most important things, because people will make two mistakes when they have edibles and they're not knowledgeable. So the first one is, it does take 30 minutes to 2 hours before an edible will kick in. And it just depends on your physiology. You could be a avid user, male, female, big, tall, doesn't matter. It hits when it hits, and that's between 30 minutes and 2 hours. So you can imagine that some people get restless, and they'll say, all right, so I took this 45 minutes ago, an hour ago, I don't feel anything. I'm going to take more. So being impatient, taking a second dose is one of the big problems. Then the first one is starting with too large of a dose, because if you start with too large of a dose, you can't dial that back, and the effects are just going to come when they come, and then you may feel uncomfortable for quite some time, because edibles will stay in your system and you'll feel the effects for about 4 to 8 hours. So I would say the cooking education, the biggest thing is to take the right dose, take your time, go low, go slow, know what you're taking.
Go low, go slow. I like it. So if you go, I'm looking right now at your website. It's a fantastic website, ourcommunityharvest.com, and then /resources has that dosing calculator on there. But you've got so much more information on this particular website that you're referring to. Do you have different classes, or how do you do that in conjunction with your teaching?
We've developed some online courses, so those are in use by other universities and actually independent workforce development companies too. So for example, the Ohio Workforce Development Organization, which is a nonprofit, they use 2 of my classes. They use the social justice and cannabis online class, and they use the introduction to the business of cannabis online course as well. So that's just a small example of getting the education out there. So I do that. And then if I have requests for in-person seminars, I obviously show up and present those as well.
Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next part in this conversation. If you're interested in starting a podcast, visit the contact page at njcriminalpodcast.com and send Meg a message. She'd love to discuss your legal podcast.